one. And we are now live here on the interwebs. Welcome, everybody, to theonering.net. It is so good to have you here with us. Oh, my gosh. It is. It's actually happening. We're starting our live show now so that everyone can see. We're not actually in my living room. This actually is magic.
Is this the first time?
No.
Is my mic on?
Your microphone is on. Yes. Hello.
All right.
You know, the microphone is on.
Is this your first live show not in your living room?
No, the first live show not in my living room was actually when Merry and Pippin, Meriadoc Brandybuck, and Peregrine Took were sitting right there. That was just on May 4th, but yeah, hi everybody. This is theonering.net. You are now watching Torn Tuesday, and I say a big hello to the live audience joining us on Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, Twitch, and Instagram, and everybody else in between. Multiple platforms in the world. Welcome back to the J.R.R. Tolkien fan community that has been developed and nurtured over 20 long years with our all-volunteer staff at the One Ring. And here we are with our weekly live Tuesday show. I am thrilled to present a very special, we're in Pride Month, and we have a Pride Month edition of Torn Tuesday here at the One Ring. A very special show. And with my very special guest, animator, illustrator, author, and extraordinary raconteur.
I don't even know what that means, so thank you.
Welcome, everybody. This is Molly Ostertag. Yay! Welcome.
Hi,
Hello.
thank you so much for having me.
I'm thrilled.
I've been truly following you guys since I was a small child. So
really? Oh, that's
what
awesome.
an honor.
Okay, I
love it.
I want to start there.
Okay.
We're Lord of the Rings fans, and we started early. And with this recent interview that you did with Dr. Luke Shelton at the Tolkien Experience podcast, friends of ours here, and he actually got you to admit that your father at 9 years old was reading you these stories live to you. This was a great organic experience for any kid at that age, because that was the same age I was reading the paperbacks, tucked away in my little corner of the room, just reading and reading. Yeah,
I think it was actually earlier than 9, because at least The Hobbit, I remember reading it and like not quite being able to read yet, and like looking over my dad's shoulder and piecing together just like literally the way paragraphs worked. But it must have been The Hobbit. I think he probably didn't read The Lord of the Rings till a little bit later, but yeah, it's like it really goes very deep in my life. It's kind of like the first book that I was like, oh, this is a good book. This is not just like a children's book. This is like some next level going to form my entire personality for the rest of my life.
Me too. It was,
I know.
At that age.
Yeah.
It was at that age.
Yeah.
I had seen the Hobbit animated cartoon in the 70s. And then,
terrifying.
And absolutely. Wait, we'll talk about the character designs.
Okay.
I totally want to talk about the character designs and the animators behind that. We'll get to that in a minute. But I tell you honestly, it was a competition between my brother and I, who were only 2.5 years separated in age. And it was like every time my brother Sean put that book down, I would sneak and grab it, and only then could I have my chance to read The Hobbit.
My gosh.
So we commandeered the book between brother and brother over and over again. I was at that age.
That's pretty intense.
I think it's kind of cool that your dad read. It's the coolest thing ever that he read it to you.
No, it's such a lovely,
so cool.
he was kind of into fantasy books of the 70s and 80s era of fantasy. So I felt just so lucky that my dad was also a nerd, and he did all the voices. He did a great Samwise Gamgee. I think that's why I love Sam Gamgee so much. He just had this accent that he did, and I was like, this is the best character in the world. So thank you, Dad.
That's kind of awesome.
I know.
This is something that I had examined in my lengthy relationship with the Tolkien community and with the independent film that I did, Ringers. I've always been interested in why there's this generational quality to some works of art that are purposely, with intent, handed down to children. You can't say that about every painting and every book or every sculpture in the world, but some works of art are so unique and have such a hold on us that we want our children to experience them in that way. That is amazing to me. And very few artists and writers fall into that category. Very few. It's just fantastic
I
when you
agree.
think about it.
I mean, I think it is so fully formed as something that exists. I mean, the frame story of it being this old text that Tolkien found and translated, that makes it feel like this, it felt like I was obsessed with that, and then I was obsessed with the Norse myths and the Greek myths and the Egyptian myths, and it felt like it was all of a piece of this kind of handed down lore. And then I think I'm having a lot of fun exploring it as an adult and as a writer, because I'm having fun kind of trying to be like, okay, who was the person who made this? And like the things that I know are very personal about that you put into your work, where can we see that? Because he did such a good job of doing this like seamless kind of story that feels like it has always existed.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. We have definitely had conversations about how to, like, when we have children, how to introduce them to the. I'm like, we have to be really like, we can't like pressure them. If they don't like them, it's okay. Just like, I'm so worried.
Okay.
I do not have children, for the record. This is just like a thought.
A thought. It is a thought. But you know what? That is a thought. There are always those thoughts that parents have. What am I going to sit down and read? Are we going to grab L. Frank Baum? Am I going to grab Charlotte's Web? What am I going to read to my kid? Ultimately, you always get around to The Hobbit. This happens.
Definitely.
This always happens.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah,
I mean,
and I'll be like, it's okay if you don't like this child, and the child will be named like Pippin, and I'll be like, it's okay, little Pippin, if you don't like this book.
You named.
Just kidding.
I met a woman once in my many travels, and her name was Galadriel.
There are a lot of Galadriels out there.
For real.
I met someone at, I just had a book signing, and like a woman or I think she was a girl, like spelled out her name for me. And she was like, oh, you're going to love this. And I was like, I don't know what this name is. And apparently it was an island from the Silmarillion. I won't say her name in case it's blowing up her spot, but like I was just like, I don't go quite that deep, but she was like, I was supposed to be named Galadriel, and my mom wouldn't let my dad quite go that distance, so we chose a very obscure reference.
It's funny.
Yeah,
I mean, the woman I met was a bit chagrined when she was her face flushed in the most cute way when she was just blushing, and I said, I think that is a remarkable and musical, beautiful, beautiful name. And she said, well, you know, I didn't see eye to eye with my parents about that at first. But she said, now that I'm a little bit older, I think it is so wonderful, and I have a different regard about it.
Yeah.
But she said, when I was very young, this was not cool for me.
I can imagine that. I also know someone who is a Galadriel, but goes by Gail. Which is
Gail.
Yeah.
Okay, Gail.
A little more normal, and I think they just don't want to be a Galadriel in their everyday life.
I could just sit here and nerd out all day. I could nerd out all day.
I'm genuinely so excited to be here in a bar talking to you.
It's great. It's wonderful to be here. We have to introduce ourselves more properly. Again, I didn't even say anything about myself, but I'm Clifford. Everybody knows me. I'm Clifford Broadway. I'm the guy who's always here. And with our hosts, my co-host Justin is now producer man back in the control room. And the last time we were here, we actually had an event. It was Star Wars Day, May 4th, and there were so many people here, even operating at 50% capacity under the restrictions we had. There was plenty of people in here, and we had Billy Boyd and Dominic Monaghan barely 3 feet away from where you sit.
And I know they were there.
It still smells of hobbits. Here. It still smells of
a waft of pipeweed and ale.
Okay, now the Sam person, the Sam story. It's like people argue, is it Anakin's story? Is it Luke Skywalker's story? And I love that side of fandom when they argue who's the central focus. When you get down to Frodo, you ask yourself, when looking at the larger narrative of The Lord of the Rings, and a lot of fans really will bring it down to, and in my opinion, I'm in that camp, that it's not Frodo's story. It is a story that brings us in with Samwise.
I agree with that.
As the cipher, the everyman, so to speak, in a general term. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think the genius of those stories is that it's this huge epic myth with these like larger than life characters, and then we really get this incredibly ordinary person too. I mean, Sam is extraordinary in a lot of ways, but he is so grounded and so down to earth, and like I just love things like he meets Aragorn, meets him by Strider, never calls him anything other than Strider. Even when he learns that he is a king and a Dunedain and like all these things, he's like, his name is, I knew him by Strider, I can't bother to be learning another name. Like, he's just a very simple boy, and yeah, very, very relatable, I think. That's always my favorite kind of character to play in D&D, to be like the kind who's like not dumb, but just like not super interested in the big lore, and it's just like, all right, what are we doing?
Yes.
Here I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's also something that you have talked about in recent interviews, and I'd like to touch upon that a bit, is that in crafting a fantasy story, the way that Tolkien has successfully, it is larger in scope than anything that had been before it. Obviously, the man was busy as a philologist, inventing languages before he...
Nerd, like such a nerd.
He was the ultimate nerd. He was a super nerd, okay?
Yeah.
Nowadays we have this new term for them. It's called conlangs, you know? constructed languages.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, they're called conlangs. And I've been watching a lot of videos about these things and about philology and all the history of languages that fascinated Professor Tolkien. Other fantasists and other writers who are always playing around in that sandbox have ever since been in the shadow of this monumental thing that Tolkien did. And you yourself as a writer, as a fantasist, and all dealing in different levels of fantasy, how do you approach, it's got to come down to this. We know how, Big Daddy in the sky, Tolkien, handles his world building.
I thought you were talking about God. Why is he in the sky?
He's like,
because he's dead. Okay.
He's gone. Yeah, because he's dead. But but respectfully, Professor Tolkien was interested in a sub-creation. This was a spiritual pursuit for him in his deeply Catholic sensibilities. So I do consider him like the creator, the sub-creator of Arda. Now, you have to be the creator of your own realms and your own characters and everything in it. How do you build your groundwork of fantasy? From where's the foundation for you as a writer?
No, that's a good question. And I think, I feel like a lot of fantasy kind of has tried to mimic Tolkien and sometimes in an unsuccessful way, where I do think that people sometimes take away having a big world, making up a language, those things matter more than like the kind of the central themes. And to me, what I love, I obviously love how deep the world building goes, but the reason why that story sticks for me is like these really beautiful themes of hope and endurance and these beautiful characters. So for me, that's kind of what I've always focused on. So I definitely am not like a world builder in that way. I really like to kind of approach my stories from an emotional point and kind of try to figure out like, what is the emotional story that I'm telling, and then how can the fantasy augment that and help that? And it's like graphic novels and animation, which is what I mostly write in. It's a visual medium, so it's already a really different thing than prose. But yeah, kind of getting to explore I love figuring out how to make magic just feel intuitively like it is real, and like the rules of it intuitively make sense. I think that that's like the best kind of world building for me is mostly under the surface.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. I love it. That's a great answer, and that's given me some insight. I love that. The question that was fielded to you by our friend Dr. Shelton is something that I'd like to bring back around, because you had talked about how certain younger audiences respond and have an entryway into fantasy.
Yeah.
For Tolkien, the cleverness of his narrative construct is to have the hobbits be more relatable characters that allow us an entry into the phantasmagoria of everything else that's going on in the world. We're as comfortable sitting in Bag End as Bilbo is.
Yeah.
And then we get taken outside the door and across the edge of the wild. We get taken on that journey. So, but do certain young people find themselves responding to themes as much as I was responding to themes of loyalty and friendship and the closeness of Frodo and Sam to allow and mitigate their own survival, because their love and their support for each other was the only way. The only way that
I'm very interested in this topic.
Totally.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. But then I didn't realize when I was reading it at that age, I didn't realize exactly what it was. I was also drawn into Tolkien's language. I was amazed at the way he would describe Mordor versus the way he would describe Fangorn. And he was passionately describing this natural world in these ways. It was so vivid. So there was all kinds of things. But I'm going to ask you, this type of thing. What is it that young people you think resonate most with? Is it narrative? Is it the power of characters' portrayal that are characters they relate to as individuals? Is it? It's kind of a weird question, but there's...
No, yeah, and I think that everyone's really different. I think that in the visual mediums that I'm like the most familiar with, I think character really is like king, and really having a strong character will carry you through a lot of kind of like weak narratives. But for me, I was always a really escapist motivated reader, and so Lord of the Rings, I wanted to go into Middle Earth. I remember I was such a lonely, weird, nerdy kid, and I would just like wander in the woods and be like, maybe I'm in Middle Earth, and I'd be like, maybe I'll see a Nazgul, and like that would suck, but at least then I would be in Middle Earth. Like I was so just wanting to be there. And I felt that about like a couple other things, but Middle Earth was definitely the big fantasy that had that. And so I think that when I do try to do that in my work, to try to do some element of wish fulfillment or escapism, but I'm also really struck. Tolkien has a quote that I can't remember word for word, but it is about fantasy helping us reconnect with our real world. Do you know that quote? Am I misattributing it?
I could find it and then I would recognize it.
It's something about like fantasy as restoration rather than escapism.
Was that from his essay on fairy stories?
Probably.
Which is I've pulled a lot of quotes from there myself. Yeah, from
but
there.
that concept I love in that it is escapism, but it's not. The escapism helps you learn to love the world that you're in, and so that's kind of something I've been really interested in doing with my work is trying to be like, how can you have a fantasy story that also helps you clarify and like appreciate things in the real world more and things that like a kid might be going through.
Definitely, I love that. That's great. We have. I know that we have, hold on. We have a live chat that is, I'm going to look at YouTube to make sure. And of course, Justin's going to be over there fielding some questions from the kids at the lunch table over there.
Don't tell me if they're being
all right.
mean. I don't want to see.
All right. We're going to, all right. In terms of illustrated fiction, all right, let's go back to Scott McCloud level of understanding comics. Yes. Can we do that?
Which, Scott McCloud is an incredible artist and author, and if anyone is interested in comics, like his book Understanding Comics is truly a seminal book on, like, I think about it constantly.
Me too. I wouldn't dare do an interview with a person at your professional level without understanding comics the way that Scott McCloud has taught me.
I'm so flattered how much you've prepared for this interview.
Thank you. I try.
You're just a fan artist.
No, but I have a passion in my heart for comic books and the comic book medium.
Yeah.
I found myself amazed at the level of sophistication and the different types of things that you can do in the illustrated medium. You have a wonderful book that actually started out as a scrolling PDF. Right. Now, how the best hunter...
Yes.
How the best hunter in the village...
Met her death.
Met her death.
It's a long title.
It's a long title. How the best hunter in the village...
Oh, man. Did you read that one?
I did. I haven't yet.
Okay.
I want to grab a copy right away.
I should have brought you a copy. Yeah.
But I know that there's a medium of online graphic presentation, and then there's print. And you can even marry the two together with animated panels where comic books are now presented as animated e-comics. Even they have comic book readers that will animate and dissolve in between different panels, which kind of, in my sensibility, kind of destroys the effort of what Scott McCloud was explaining to us of how how the eye tricks itself into hidden motion in between panels and things that are actions that are not there that the mind understands are there. Right. You guys read it. Understanding Comics is the best.
It's such a good book.
So where do you start with your favorite stories? Do you start with the character design? Do you want to start with you think to yourself, that story makes me feel compelled to tell it? Is it as simple as that?
Man, I mean, it's so different depending on what it is, but I think How the Best Hunter in the Village Met Her Death, which is a mini comic I did a couple years ago, and it's sort of my favorite thing I've ever done even now. And so it's the format that I most love, but it's harder to translate into graphic novel form. So I only do it for shorter comics, but it really is just like making a really long Photoshop document and just drawing and kind of knowing that the eye, like you're scrolling through a Twitter feed or something, knowing that the propulsion will take the reader downward. And so trying to figure out how to move them through that space without the kind of like sort of changing it to think in page turns is a whole other skill, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I really start with the story, and then the characters, I usually kind of start to figure them out as I'm sketching it and start to really figure out like who they are in the story and what their physical body language is and how to... how they look. So that's kind of usually a bit of a more organic thing. Yeah. But yeah, I've been having so much fun. Like I had like such a Lord of the Rings breakdown last year and just like really got obsessed. But I drew a ton of comics that were in that really long scroll format that were just like literal interpretations of passages from the book, some of my favorite passages. And it was really cool to get to dig into the language in that way, and to sort of like, when you're a cartoonist, you also are kind of acting with the characters, and so trying to figuring out like these little moments and little touches and facial expressions and how that can really play with the text and then bring out a different meaning or bring out these emotions that I think like were intended by Tolkien but were kind of like subliminal in the text itself. So that was just like, it's been such a fun project to kind of be taking those like paragraphs from a book that I love and turning them into comics.
There's a lot of love and energy and embrace for that. The account is Hobbit Gay, not just, you know, there's the Molly Ostertag account, but there's also the other account.
The secret Hobbit account.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
There's a lot. I don't know where Justin went, but I'm sure he's nearby somewhere.
I'm here.
Oh, you're there. Oh, Justin. Hey, we have
in the sky.
All right.
I'm in the closet.
No,
I'm not in the closet.
Wait, you're not supposed to be in the closet anymore, Justin.
Come out of the closet, Justin. It's Pride
No,
Month.
it's okay here.
It's okay. It's okay. We're all friends here. There's enough room.
The chat room wants to know, why did you call your art account Hobbit Gay?
It's very simple. I'm just gay, and I thought the Hobbits were also gay, and I wanted to make an account about it. And I was talking too much on my main account about it, and I was like, I have a lot of followers here, and they're here for like a professional, like my professional work. So I was like, I'm going to sort of sideline all of my like queer interpretation of Tolkien to this one account, and it's been fun. I've made a lot of friends. It's been really lovely.
It's super fun.
But what wasn't there an explanation that you made of like, if you read Tolkien literally, it's kind of I mean, Cliff, you've seen some Twitter accounts that quote Tolkien literally.
Well, yeah, actually, I have seen. There's a brand new Tolkien account that just started up. It's called Literally Tolkien.
Yeah,
and it just drops fun random quotes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And the other one is Tolkien Proverbs. He's a big account, and he drops special curated proverbs that are like timeless pieces of wisdom instead of just the random bits.
I feel like sometimes I see them and it's something I disagree with, and I'm like, but then I remember like who the character is, and I'm like, okay, it makes sense for the character.
Let's talk a little bit more about interpretation in queer spaces and in the LGBTQ community of Tolkien and his characters. Okay. We might as well just get to the big elephant in the room. And there's
Please don't send me hate messages.
Don't
like,
send me hate
I
messages
won't see
either.
them, but just like please, like just like turn it off if you're bothered.
Like,
I've made friends and also enemies in the last year.
I can tell you from a more grounded and humanistic perspective that there is a wide, like as wide as the horizon is wide, there's a breadth of accessibility in what Professor Tolkien wrote that, in a humanistic way, reaches into the heart and the soul of every single one of us and makes us better people. I'm not Catholic, but I was raised a Southern Methodist. That didn't matter. I still had access to Professor Tolkien's ideas, and it made me a better person. It enriched my life. And why not then? Why not have that kind of access to a story which is fundamentally about finding the best in your little secret self, when you are the most small and unassuming little person, far away from the great lords and wizards and the wide reckoning of great things around you.
Yeah.
And you're the person who can change things and make things better for yourself and everyone around you. And the sensibilities there are wide open for everyone to access. So let's just start with me as a host of my show of over 10 years here on theonering.net. I would encourage my audience to also help us out and inform this conversation with that more healthy and, I think, welcoming, egalitarian attitude. And thank you for doing that. I'm going to say thank you to my audience with starting from that point. Let's have a humanistic point of view about this first. And now, back to Molly. That was just me being Dumbledore.
I know, I feel like there was like a defensiveness.
That was me being Dumbledore for a minute, and me telling the first years in the school to behave and to pay attention to what's really going on here.
Yeah,
okay,
I mean, I think fundamentally it is a story about love. I mean, that is what I find in it, is all these different forms of love, and I find it really beautiful. And I think any classic story you can read into and interpret what you want from it. And I definitely have my own personal opinions. I'm working on an essay that's coming out sometime this month about these queer readings. So like, I think we'll have some fun stuff to talk about the next time we chat too.
It is.
Yeah, it's been
there.
really interesting to do research into it, and kind of like there's a lot of arguments that go around, and it's been really interesting to like dig into those. And yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
There's absolutely an entry point into this conversation, regardless of whether you think that Professor Tolkien, in his Catholicism, would not approve there are a lot of things that Professor Tolkien never approved of in the 1960s, of the way his fandom was embracing his books. But he was happy to get those checks, and his publishers were thrilled that Professor Tolkien got young people in the counterculture involved into stopping the Ace Books publication, which was an illegal.
Oh, yeah.
It was an illegal.
Yeah. I was just reading his letters
legit.
About it.
Yes,
I'm so fired up about it.
And he was. He got young people, and so in honor of that, I know that it's okay for all of us to just be here together and talk about this, but it's not lost on me that brand new people coming into The Lord of the Rings for the first time pick up on the things that Molly has picked up on, that I picked up on when I was a kid. There was a brand new video that just came out from a beautiful young lady who had experienced reading the books for the first time and did a reaction video. And there's millions and millions of those on YouTube of people doing first-time reactions to watching the films and reading the books.
I wonder if I've seen it.
And I mentioned her here in my Twitter feed, and she actually stopped the video and said, "I want you guys to look at this." And she underlined the sentence in the book and said, "They awoke together, hand in hand."
Listen.
And I'm
my
like,
book is so full of Post-it notes. It's so embarrassing, and it's only those sections. Like
exactly. I mean, there is a certain affection between these male characters that Professor Tolkien was exploring for a purpose, and he knew what he was doing. I assert that Tolkien was a genius, and he knew what he was doing, and he was exploring this idea of this affection and this bond between men. And for other people to come into it and find out about it and interpret it their own way is totally fine. I'm just letting you know that it's fine.
It is fine.
It's
he
fine.
told me himself, actually, that it's fine. I did a little seance, and he was like, go for it.
Oh, my God.
Sorry, is that
That's true. Okay.
sacrilegious?
No. I'm telling you. Where is it? Where's this lovely lady? And hold on, I'm going to find it.
Okay.
And then we're going to please go ahead. Go right ahead.
Oh, yeah, but it has just been so, I think I have definitely okay.
This is it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and she was
I haven't seen her. Okay, I'll watch that. That's so cute.
She was so honest.
Yeah.
And people do pick up on the elements that are there.
Yeah.
And for it to be interpreted one way or another is up to the reader. And Professor Tolkien wanted that to be the case.
Yeah, very actively. I take a lot of inspiration from that quote of his. That's I leave the world to other hands to paint, and he's it's basically something where he's I am leaving parts of this world open for people to explore. And so it's kind of cool to feel as a fan artist, as well as an author of my own stuff, I can come in and explore these parts of the story that, he literally, even if he had wanted to tell that story at the time and place that he was in, it literally was illegal. So, and a sort of social death sentence. So I think it's kind of lovely to sort of be maybe this was the story he intended, and maybe we can tell it in a more honest way now in a more modern time with more modern ideas about the different beautiful ways that people can love each other.
Question from the chat. We talked a lot about applicability and what Tolkien intended versus what the fans are. In your own work, either in your animated cartoons or your books, have the fans or the readers taken it to a place you didn't intend or expect?
Taking away the idea of what is allegorical in your intent, so that it's always there. That the allegorical intent is always the intent of the author. And Tolkien rather likes to pull that way back and let it be more accessible to the interpretation of the people and of their time and of their generation when they would read it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think obviously I've been putting out comics for the past decade, so it hasn't had quite the accumulation of interpretations, but I absolutely have had people come in and read different things, and I that is what I truly love about especially books and especially kind of reading, and I'm including graphic novels in that, is that the author puts out one thing that is very personal and very much comes from themselves, and then the reader is bringing their own experience. And so every person's experience of reading a book is kind of unique because it is sort of the meeting of these two minds. And so I've definitely had that with my graphic novel series, and it's such a huge compliment when someone is oh, this is how I really read it. What did you intend? And I'm I don't even want to tell you. What I put in is that's what I gave you. I let the characters describe themselves in their own words. If you read into it something that really spoke to you, that's the work succeeding, in my opinion. So I'm definitely I don't know if that's death of the author, but it's just being a fan of kind of letting people bring their own eyes and their own experiences to a narrative.
Cliff, does that
Indeed.
track with what Tolkien said?
Well, there's some vagary in perhaps that question. And does it track with what Professor Tolkien said was that he was always exploring these stories to satisfy his own linguistic and historical interests. And at the same time, he realized, oh, as an academic, I'm only going to make this much money, and I could make this much money and put my kids through school, and I could get Edith and myself into a much nicer house. You know what I mean? So this is reality.
I'm sure it was more than that, though, too.
Of course, of course. But there's a chapter in the book where, in his biography by Humphrey Carpenter, it's called Cash or Kudos, where Professor Tolkien had, choices to make in his career about, whether he was going to continue academically or continue to work as an author with the popularity that was coming to other authors he knew. And he was so surprised. Everyone was so thrilled at the sales of The Hobbit in the late 1930s. It was a huge success for The Hobbit. Its sales in the late 30s. No one knew, no one expected, no one ever expected he would go back and write The Lord of the Rings. He didn't plan on it. It wasn't in the grand design. It was never there. The Lord of the Rings was never there until necessity pulled it out of him creatively.
Yeah, I've been reading the history of Middle-earth and kind of, it's like all the collection of all the drafts of the book, and it's so funny to just like go through the drafts of Lord of the Rings, and he's like, maybe, okay, it's a sequel, it's about Bilbo. Maybe Bilbo has a wife. Bilbo doesn't have a wife. I can't figure out why, but Bilbo's just not the marrying type. Like, maybe Frodo's Bilbo's son. Maybe his name is Bingo. Like,
Bingo.
it's so...
Maybe his name is Bingo.
Yes. And it's so cute.
I'm amazed you know that. That's Come on,
bro. But it's like, it's so...
I love it.
And the first chunk of it is so whimsical, and then you can kind of tell in the draft there's like this like encroaching like evil that he's like oh, maybe the ring does this and maybe it's tied into this old story that I wrote. And it's so the organic way of discovering a story is like that is the most exciting thing about writing. So I love like reading his old drafts.
I love that too. I wrote a lengthy article for DeviantArt once, and it was called An Accidental Tourist. And I was describing Professor Tolkien as someone who just accidentally, perhaps creatively, had a happy accident. That he wandered through his own world and discovered what it was and how far the roots went in the story.
There's a very interesting quote from him where someone is asking him intention behind something, and he's like, I wrote pretty much all of it without intention. And I love that. Like, I love that it is like, I don't know if he might not be telling the truth with that too. Like, that sort of seems like something you say to not answer a question. But I love the idea that it was this very creative force, because I think that then, again, when we're talking about how to read into it and how to read different characters, we can sort of, it was coming from very deep within Tolkien, and like it wasn't all intended. He didn't have like a clean meaning for everything, and so I think that like it's very valid to go in and find different readings because he himself did not know exactly what he was doing all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he also said this.
Oh, you've got like quotes pulled up.
I've got one.
Yeah.
I've got one that I've got to pull up because he said. He actually says it's not about anything other than itself. Let me find that quote. Give me 2 seconds, and I will pull that quote for you. It says, certainly it has no allegorical intentions. This is a direct quote from Tolkien himself. Certainly it has no allegorical intentions, general, particular, or topical, moral, religious, or political, quote unquote, period. So he really wanted you to have the power to walk away under the persuasive power of that story to get something out of it on your own terms.
And it's so interesting. I mean, there's such an intense like Catholic readership, which I like have full respect for, that people really find like beauty and religion in that work. As a kid who was like not raised religious at all, like I never saw any of that. And I was like, I also read C.S. Lewis, and I was like, okay, I get it. The lion is Jesus. Like, it's very clear what you're doing here, Mr. Lewis.
Very clear.
And it was just like, I always thought that Tolkien was this kind of fantasy that was, I don't know, almost without a religion, because it is about these people just trying as hard as they can to do what they can. And it doesn't quite feel like Frodo or Sam have these like destinies or prophecies that they're fulfilling. They're just trying as hard as they can. And that that always like so much fantasy is about a chosen one or about a prophecy being fulfilled, this kind of deistic look at the story, and I've never connected with that, and so yeah, it's really interesting dude. Weird dude. I love him.
All right, let's address the possible conversation of whether or not Tolkien was quote unquote woke. This is something that has, for better or for worse, come up in recent conversation. No, I'm going to tell you this. No, here's all that anybody needs to understand about how silly it is to be so reductive. It is incredibly not helpful, and not in an intellectually honest way. It's really not helpful to be that reductive. Let's just say that Professor Tolkien was a Catholic, a very, very, very spiritual, devout Catholic. However, he possessed a complicated mind that had many, many different complexities about many things that might not match up with what we consider today a 21st, Americanized idea of what conservative politics or conservative ideas are. Just because one thing is true doesn't mean the other thing is automatically true. In fact, Professor Tolkien's attitude on race theory that was in place during World War II, his attitudes on race theory are so anti-Nazi German propaganda.
Yeah.
And he told them, you can let a German publication of my book go hang in the gallows instead of me bothering to prove my Aryan ancestry to the German publisher.
Yeah.
He's like, I regret, quote unquote, he said this, I actually regret that I don't have more Jewish friends, those very, very talented people. So he might be super conservative and Catholic, but he also was pro-environmentalism. And maybe modern conservatism is not always green. People think that green is always over here for the liberal and progressive side of the argument, but maybe you can be many things.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe you can be many things.
It's a little
all
bit
at
of
once.
a mood conversation because I think the words have changed, and he lived in a completely different world and place than we are, and so I think like trying to apply it to like social justice and activism and politics in America in the 21st century is just sort of strange. So I think it's always worth just
tenuous. It's too tenuous to even make
whenever
a thread.
I think when people are curious, it's always worth, and this is for like all historical people and all people in general, like it's worth digging into what they actually wrote and what they actually believed, because no one is like.
Aren't we allowed to be complex human beings?
No.
Thank you.
This is the internet. We're not allowed.
Yeah, this is the internet. We're only allowed to. You could totally change the subject.
I would love to. I know.
Fine. Whoa, there's a fog machine that just kicked in. The cantina is now going to have...
This is a wild live show.
Our director of photography planned this ahead of time.
Okay. Could you repeat that, Justin?
There's smoke filling the bar. I love it. What was that?
The bar is burning down. It's fine. We'll keep talking.
The difference between writing for television or writing for the printed page.
Yeah, I mean, a million different things. I've written mostly for animation, mostly for 22-minute episodes for children's cartoons, which is this very, very specific format. It's just like there's 22 minutes exactly. You kind of have to be like, here's the end of the first act, the second act. Like there's commercial breaks. It's very tight, which is not a bad thing. Like there's so much fun to be had in that medium. And so many ways to subvert it, which I really love. Also on TV, you're working with other people. And so that's like, it's both working with a showrunner and working with a writer's room to really find the best story together. And that's so fun and cool because we'll just all kind of come together and have different perspectives and have like the best rooms are like, you have the person who's really funny, you have the person who's like really good at lore, you have the person who's really good at drama, and like you all sort of contribute to make something really strong. And you want it to be strong because then you're passing it to a million artists who are all going to touch it and like give it their own special spark. So for me, writing for TV, I always just try to give the artists a really, really strong structure to then improvise on because it is really collaborative. And then, for books and prose, books are really intimate. Most of my comics are just me. My recent book was like colored by a colorist, Marta Gaiho. And I do have it here. Not to show for it, but it's drawn, it's written and drawn by me, and kind of very, very much exactly what I wanted. I really didn't change anything for anyone. And so that's like its own special kind of story, but it's also limited because it's like the story that I could tell and the story that I could draw. And so, yeah, animation can be more broad. And then like also the reaction to it is different. I think animation is it's so fun. I wrote on Owl House, which had a bunch of episodes come out last summer. There's more coming out this weekend.
Yes, they are. They're on schedule.
I know.
And all the Disney Plus fans are still out there screaming and pulling their hair out
I know.
that there's no Owl House available on Disney. But hey, it's because it's still being broadcast on the Disney Channel itself. But sometime soon.
I don't know about all of that. But yeah, I never know that stuff. But that was really fun to have that kind of people engaging with it in real time as it was streaming and being like, here is a shot of the exact moment that I loved, and it's like, oh my God, I wrote that scene, or I remember seeing those storyboards. And so that's really cool. And then a book is much more intimate. It's usually someone reads it and they have this personal experience, and then if you're really lucky, they will tell you about it. And it's just like, it's usually a less like shared experience, which is again why I think like Tolkien fandom is really fun, because we're all kind of trying to share like our own individual paths through the books. So yeah, there's a ton of differences, and I love them both very much.
The collaborative process must be such a dynamic change after you've been accustomed to working on your own.
Yes.
Especially during a COVID year where you had a lot of time to focus and work on your own material. And for many artists, it became a wildly productive year in terms of creativity. It
kind of did. It's sort of interesting to look at. Like, I think we all hyper-focused. I mean, I drew this book in COVID, and then I was just doing like freelance writing, so I wasn't working in a writer's room. And then I just, my brain broke, and I just did Lord of the Rings fan art for every day for 6 months, and it was so fun. And it was really cool to follow that passion. Like, I needed an escape really badly, and that was like, oh, there's this entire world that I can really dive into and like never get tired of. So it was very nice.
I love that. I love it. Oh, there has been a published Hobbit comic book collection. Lovely watercolors.
Yeah.
There's not much. There's not much in terms of reinventing, the wheel. There's nothing really ambitious about it, but it was a lovely watercolor book of The Hobbit.
Yeah, it would be huge. I mean, the thing with a graphic novel, like I'll write, I think the script for this book is like 260 pages, and the script was like,
I can't wait to read this.
Maybe 25 to 50 pages. Like, it wasn't that long, because you can have one of those if you like.
I love it. Really?
Of course,
oh my gosh, that's so great.
But yeah, like you're translating every single word into text, and so like I'll make these really long comics based on Tolkien, and it'll be based on like 2 paragraphs, and that will give me pages and pages of content. So I think like Lord of the Rings graphic novel, we'll see. I have several Tolkien pet projects that I would love to do, but one of them is definitely, I think it would be so cool to have a graphic novel just of the Scouring of the Shire, and kind of that we never saw it in the movie, and just to be like, it's sort of this separate adventure. It's sort of happening once the main thing has wrapped up, but it has all these really poignant parallels in it, and so
my gosh, that would be fantastic. I could
I know.
Like and they're just like a standalone episode, and which has never been treated right by anybody who's ever adapted the films.
And it's so beautiful, and it's so poignant, and like Merry and Pippin have become these warriors, and Frodo is so sick of violence, and he doesn't want anyone to be killed. And then Farmer Cotton, I think, is like a revolutionary. Like, it's just like all, maybe that's someone else, but it's just like
Farmer Cotton.
You're
right.
Okay,
You're right.
He's like sitting there, and like he's like not supposed to be outside, and he's like sitting smoking his pipe in the street, and then all the people who are occupying the Shire come to get him, and then like all the other hobbits step out, and it's just like it's a very good chapter, and that's a pet project I would love to do.
And then they suddenly realized that Farmer Cotton was not at all alone. I remember that. That was just, I love that.
Saruman's there. Grima is there. It's like,
Since they've got the rights to it now, we need to definitely talk about what kind of energy could get behind other things. Now, the new Amazon TV series is something you could consider a pyramid. It's that TV show itself will be at the top, and there'll be another level of all these auxiliary stories and other series, and then merchandise, another level underneath that. Think of it as a pyramid and lots of levels. And underneath that, more video games and more,
Is that their plan, or is that like your hope for it?
No, it's not my hope. It's it's the
Okay.
plan that they have stated, but it's also what I think is a natural expectation for the outrageous amount of money they paid to get the intellectual property from the Tolkien estate. And that's a lot. We're talking Jeff. Yes, the Jeff Bezos money has gone into also grabbing Hobbit story rights from the old existing Saul Zaentz deal. And Saul Zaentz had the deal with Ralph Bakshi and with New Line Cinema to make the the Peter Jackson films and the Ralph Bakshi film were all made under the Saul Zaentz original deal. And then the Hobbit movies were delayed and delayed and delayed because of MGM's lingering control over distribution rights of the Hobbit. And that's how they lost Guillermo del Toro as the director. Yes.
I remember reading about his take on it like when I was a kid, and I'm so
I know,
rest in
right?
peace.
Rest in peace.
Yeah.
The Hobbit that never was. I love that question, Justin.
Yeah, I think that animation, like, absolutely, there's a history of that kind of smaller story that can be. What I love about drawings in general, animation and comics, is that they really elevate ordinary moments, and it takes these very, very small things that can just be a simple dinner at a table, and you can, by animating it, you bring all of this love and care and thought into it, and you really infuse it with meaning. And so I think the Shire is sort of all about that. The Shire is about these like smaller stories and these smaller people. And I just think when I think of like a Ghibli film, or I think of Moomin, or I think of Hilda, I feel like that kind of tone would really, really suit a Shire story. So that's my other pet project. I'm trying so hard. Every time I like meet with someone in Hollywood, I'm like, do you know if I can, could you help me do this? And everyone's like, no.
I think it's excellent. I'm suddenly reminded of Ponyo, where Sasuke has everything laid out on the table, and Sasuke's mom is making tea and ramen for the two kids. And you're like, it's just exactly as you explained. It's just people having a meal, but it is animated with such care, and the emotion of that little girl who is now in a human body for the first time, discovering what ramen is for the first time, and it lights up her eyes, and, and the audience is like, it's you melt. And you know that's what Miyazaki wants you to do. He wants you to melt like butter in the seat, and that's what I do. Every Miyazaki film makes me melt.
Incredible.
And melt and melt.
But
and melt.
and I think
I love it.
just like telling those smaller stories, and kind of like I think that you still could bring in these elements of magic, but I think there's a reason why everybody wants to live in the Shire, and I think a story like that could be a really lovely form of like wish fulfillment, escapism, which I love animation for.
I would like to see a series built around the later years of Samwise and all the many years he's elected mayor.
I know. Oh, it's just a political drama.
It's just
Veep.
Yeah, it's Veep.
Can we get Sean Astin in on this?
Sean Astin coming in as the Veep of the Shire. That would be so good. That would be so fun.
I mean, truly, I can think of so many. But I like.
Someone asked me today, and they said, "Want a TV show that could be animated?" And I said, "Yeah, let's do the Hardy Boys mysteries, but it's the Merry and Pippin Mystery Diaries."
Oh my God!
And they solve little farmyard mysteries around the Shire.
And it's so. I mean, we had like whether you use those characters, or I feel like there's a line in the Hobbit where Bilbo's like, Gandalf, you're the one who took all those like young lads and lasses off into the blue and like took them on adventures. And like, what's that story? That's a whole show. That's my pitch.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God, please let me do it.
That is a great, that's it.
Yeah.
There's a great show. Gandalf.
I bet that Ian McKellen would be down to do a voice. I'm just saying that for him. I don't know, but.
Yes. Yeah, Sir Ian McKellen. That'd be great. That would be so
if
great.
I let him be a little bit gay in the animated show, I feel like he'd be down.
It's so funny. I love it. I think that there's a new marketplace for theatricals. And this hasn't even been talked about or looked into yet. But if Cyndi Lauper can come back to Broadway and bring Kinky Boots and get all these Tony Awards, and if Disney theatricals can create a massive engine of success, why not? Let's go back to, I know there was a failed Lord of the Rings musical. It failed, yes it did. It was, you're right.
It's got a very romantic song in it though, so I like it.
Okay. Well, no, why not?
I do think that there's a desire for small stories. I think that it's kind of funny because I think like knowing having like been in animation for a bit, there is like always this desire to be like, okay, how far can we go and how big can we make it? But I think a lot of the shows that we love do start with these kind of very like small and cozy stories. And I think it's about balancing that with like the right amount of adventure and not having it be boring, I guess. But yeah, I think there's like a lot of like joy and interest to be found in that kind of story.
Well, what if they don't have hobbits in the Amazon TV series? Because technically, we don't know. We don't know yet, but it's not set in the Third Age. There's no Shire. It wasn't even founded yet. Where are we going to get hobbits in the Second Age when we're busy looking at the difficult things happening in Numenor? That's what I can't figure that out yet.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not as psyched about the show. I think I don't like. Despite that, I've just professed that I would love to like make adaptations of this stuff and like make new stories. What I love about Lord of the Rings is that it all came from one person. So it seems like the show they're like really going to be making new stories, which could be really, really cool. But I think it won't have quite the same resonance for me as this. There's something very magical about it all coming from one person, and that's why like my favorite forms of adaptation I've made are the ones where I'm just taking the text and drawing on it, because then I feel like I'm really engaging with the person who wrote it, and yeah.
Excellent.
We'll see.
What challenges do you think the Amazon writers room have? Because you worked on Thundercats War, right?
I did. It wasn't really in the writer's room, but I did freelance on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that has a very legacy thing. Like,
That's true.
How did they manage that?
They wanted,
Totally new show.
Yeah. They took something that was dearly held by geekdom and wanted to do a whole fresh revisit to it.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah. And I mean, my wife did She-Ra, so I'm a little more familiar with that process as well. But yeah, I mean, I think that it seems like the most artistically successful ones are people who come in with with both love for the original, but also their very own specific take on it. So I think the showrunner of Thundercats loves Thundercats so deeply. Like when I met with him to do my episodes, he was like, here's what to watch. Here's the toys that they're based on. Here's what, like, he had so much trivia and so much love for that story. And then he also kind of wanted to interpret it in this new kind of more modern cartoon looking way. And I think that that's really cool. I think that like having a perspective, I think it's just like the thing, we're sort of living in this age of like big franchises, like just getting mined for everything that they have. And my favorite like results of that are always when someone has a very specific idea and is kind of using the franchise to tell their own story. So yeah, I'm like we're in a Star Wars bar right now. I'm not like a super Star Wars person, but like I love The Mandalorian because it just felt like this small, weird story. Again, like it's not a slow story, but it is a small story. It's not concerning itself with the epic battles of Star Wars, and it's not featuring many of the other characters that you like have come to know. And to me, that was so much more interesting than like any of the big budget movies that had come out, because it just felt really specific.
Yeah. That very specific approach to The Mandalorian and its interest in tipping its cowboy hat to the Western genre was so good, because I look at Solo and I realize, oh, this is a heist movie. More than it's interested in being a Star Wars movie, it wants to be a heist movie, and that's what I liked about it. And then that's kind of what I liked about Cruella. It's a heist movie at first, and you know.
I just watched Cruella. It was actually kind of fun, wasn't it?
Yes,
it was so campy.
It is. It's actually there's more interesting things. Yeah. It's a very fascinating film to me, Cruella. Yeah. But the thing about what was I just saying?
But the reinterpretation,
about Star Wars, and
I think like the Watchmen series did that too. Like instead of redoing once again this like classic Alan Moore comic book, they were like, let's sort of take it in a new direction and use this world to explore it, and that was so cool. And it was like Watchmen is already a deconstruction of superheroes, so they didn't feel the need to deconstruct it. They just wanted to explore the world more. So honestly, like I think that the show would pull me in if it had a lot of really fresh ideas. And I know that can be scary when you're working with this project, this kind of property, because we're all so rabid and like we're all like, but you have to do it right, and you have to include this, and you have to include that. Like I am also like that, but I think that it will be the most interesting if they really kind of do their own thing.
I agree. We're gonna have to keep a close eye on what Loki is doing, These new.
Oh, yeah.
I've read a lot about the 2 episodes that the press has seen already, but if that is influential on the Lord of the Rings show, I can see how, because Anatar / Sauron is going to be running around trying to be all nice and charming and sweet to people, so he can get his way, so he can enact his secret plans. So this Tom Hiddleston type of vibe is going to be. I wonder if it's going to influence. But it might not. It might not at all, because they wrote their entire season 1 separated from the rest of the world, and maybe there's no influence at all. But I am anticipating, and I've been warning our live audience for many, many months that we're now going to get to see our boy Sauron himself,
oh my God,
for the first time as a bipedal, walking around human.
Bipedal, bisexual.
Who, yeah, might be. Absolutely.
Listen, you never know.
You never know. He might be.
Speaking of Loki.
Anything to get his way. If he can charm the pants off of anybody, he's going to use his wily ways to charm people.
And it's so interesting because that is such a different story than the Lord of the Rings, and like the themes of it are so different. And so
yes,
like
he
I
was
feel
just
like
an abstract.
and I feel like even Lord of the Rings, like there's not a lot of tricksy characters in there. Like we have like Grima Wormtongue, and he's like pretty obviously evil. His name is Grima Wormtongue. Like we don't have like a lot of surprise evil people. I don't think that was quite Tolkien's interest, and so it could be really interesting. I'm open.
Me too. We'll see.
They're shooting it in New Zealand, so I'm always down to watch a landscape.
It's like, well, I mean, we have to get mentally used to the idea of relating to him as a character like Peter Baelish, who's walking around manipulating everybody, instead of just a floating eye in the tower.
Yeah.
So that's going to be really, really, really different for us as an audience to think about Sauron in a different way.
Well, and I think like the way we think about villains and evil right now is very different than the way Tolkien wrote about villains and evil. I think he had.
True.
It's sort of my least favorite part of his books is the flattening of the orcs, the kind of being like this like evil kind of like race of creatures. That to me is that's like definitely my least favorite part. And to have Sauron kind of being this like ominous figure, but not a personality who is engaging with the story. And so it's interesting. I just think that we're in a time right now where we're really enjoying villain stories.
We are.
Yeah.
So this is the perfect time to do a Sauron story because he's got 19 rings to give away.
19?
Right?
Well,
Man.
9 to the men, 7 to the dwarves.
Oh, yeah. I sat down. I showed a friend over quarantine who had never seen The Lord of the Rings before. We like did a big watch with the extended editions, and like right at the beginning, she was like, "There's more than one ring," and it's called The Lord of the Rings.
Do you think the TV show should carry the same tone that the movies did, or did the movies and the books of The Lord of the Rings?
I worry about the lingering influence of Game of Thrones on the appetite of the television audience itself.
Yeah.
All right, because they're not making this for a literary audience. They're making it for a TV audience. Let's start with that, right? And I think that there's going to be some flavors that we may or may not want there. I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it will be the most ultimately creatively successful if it does its own thing. So I think, yeah, I know that, I mean, probably like this community will be annoyed if it goes like too far off the track, but I think that will make a much more interesting show than if they try to just be like, here is more content based on the Peter Jackson films.
Right.
Do you think there's room to have multiple Middle-earth shows on TV at the same time, kind of like what Star Wars is doing?
Why not? Yeah, why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. I really do I love the books. And so I think I'm a little selfish in that I'm like, I want to make something, but I don't know how interested I am in like engaging with the other interpretations of it. So that's just me being like egocentric. But, well, it's really just me wanting to like go inside Middle-earth and like get as close as I can to the narrative by creating it. But yeah, I think that I think it's a wide world and it's incredibly fleshed out, and there's so many different kinds of characters and so many different narratives that could be told in there. And there is like, I think fan fiction writers have been doing that for the last, 70 years anyway. So I think that's sort of evident that there is a lot of different stories that we could tell.
There are. Would you ever be interested in crossing into another medium besides animation, perhaps puppetry. Thinking about the great success that Brian Froud and Toby Froud had in having their artwork transitioned into puppets and creatures by the talented people at the Henson Company. Would you like to see some of your designs translate into a different medium like handheld puppetry?
Never thought of that before.
Wouldn't that be cool, though?
That would be cool.
Yeah, it would
I
be
used
super
to,
cool.
when I was a teenager, I worked at a live-action role-playing summer camp, which was like extremely cool.
That is cool.
And I was like, I worked behind the scenes in the like sets and props department, and so we would make all kinds of like monster costumes and puppets and like cool masks that you could use. And so I do have a soft spot for it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think, I mean, The Witch Boy, my graphic novel, is being made into a movie at Netflix, and so that will be its own special thing. And yeah, I would love to do live action sometime, because I think it's just, again, it's just like every medium has its own special things. And so I think live action has this like subtlety that would be really fun to explore someday.
I'm excited. So excited for Witch Boy as an adaptation.
Yeah.
I want to say congrats on that,
Thanks.
and I'm a fan. I don't want to be a fanboy because I'm trying to be dignified during this conversation.
All good.
But I'm telling you, okay, the fact that Netflix has decided to bring Neil Gaiman's The Sandman and your graphic novels, the Witch Boy, and they've done such a great job with Lock and Key, and some interesting things have gone by the wayside. We know that Death Note was whatever, but most of the time, sorry Netflix, most of the time they're doing great stuff, and The Dark Crystal was fantastic. So you got faith that Netflix and the people bringing it all together are gonna do some great stuff?
I do. It's
Yeah?
specifically, and you know, it's like, I think I never put my faith in companies, I guess, but it's like this specific team. Min-Kyu Lee is the director. He is a really, really talented director from Disney, and he has this very specific, he kind of read the book and came to me with his very specific personal take of like how he read into it as like a closeted, like how he read sort of his closeted childhood into it. And again, it's one of those things where he has a take on it that is not exactly my intention, but he is taking it in his direction, and I'm so excited. Like, to me, that transformation is what's really exciting about like getting to do that kind of project. It's going to be a musical. Amazing. I don't know anything about musicals. Like, it's going to be, it's
so
just like,
cool.
it's going to be very much its own thing, and like I'm
That's
really
cool.
just excited to watch it at this point. Like,
That's cool. That's
yeah,
so cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of great people on it.
That's awesome. I mean, well, you know, Sweet Tooth is the talk of the town.
Yeah.
And it's I
need
haven't
to
seen
watch
it yet,
I haven't either.
but you know, the original book, highly recommended. Was it Lemire?
Yeah, that's a Jeff Lemire.
It's
I'm
Jeff
pretty
Lemire.
sure.
Yeah. Highly recommended book. But I have yet to see it. I'm going to watch it and see what's going on. But there's so much going on now.
Yeah.
This is a great time to be a creative.
Yeah.
It really is. It's a great time to be a geek. That's for sure.
It is. I mean, I sometimes get a little, I think I do get a little tired of the franchise-ness of it all. I can't quite buy into that sort of thing, but it feels really exciting to be making original work right now, and so I'm kind of trying to prioritize, despite having just talked for like 20 minutes about how I want to make a Shire cartoon. I am like getting the most excited about like my own original work and also other people's, because I feel like there's just like so much cool stuff happening.
Someone in the live chat on YouTube, the fans are talking about Feanor, of course. He's always. Someone sent me the best meme ever today. I'm going to show it to you.
Okay.
They're talking about first age video games. Yes, it is possible because of the new deal which is way beyond the previous Saul Zentz deal. It might be possible that the Tolkien estate would license bits of the Silmarillion for other purposes and for video games. It is quite possible. We don't know yet if it's going to happen. But today's favorite meme, let me find it. Here's today's favorite meme. Here it is. Feanor was here.
Okay, I do know. Like, I haven't read the Silmarillion, but I do know that Feanor does
Yeah.
some stuff.
Yeah,
He's a
there's some
bad
stuff.
boy.
It's a picture of
He's a mess.
It's a picture of all these boats on fire, completely destroyed, all these beautiful boats on fire being burned and destroyed. And they're not Arda, they're not elven boats. It's actually modern boats, probably in Chesapeake Bay or something. But it says Feanor was here, and yeah, that's what's going to happen.
Just traveling around burning boats.
So bad. Well, I'm down for, you know, having you come back on our show anytime, and please, Molly, bring your wife.
Oh,
It would be
man,
so
that was
wonderful.
so nice. Yeah.
Yes. Because you know the broship of the ring is something we always love talking about, as you know, even though it's Ancient. It's
Ancient Tumblr history.
Ancient
at this point.
Tumblr history.
What I love is that I got so into Lord of the Rings this year, and I've really just been talking about it a lot. And people are like, "I'm so glad that you introduced Noel to Lord of the Rings," and he gets so mad at me, like, he's like, "I knew about this first," which is not true. We both knew about it at the same time. That was the first work I saw of Noel, so I was like, "Who's this person?" They're interesting.
That's so cool.
I guess it's kind of funny.
We get a lot of tweets from
That's
people
funny.
during the pandemic saying Lord of the Rings really helped them get through it. What do you think it is about those movies and those books that help people get through the pandemic?
Yeah, the escapism, the themes of hope in a very, I think, the queer reading that I like really, I got very attached to was sort of just feeling like you are with this person that you love so much, and you are very small, and you are trying your best to like do good in the world, but you have no idea if you're having any success and if you're going to succeed, and like, in fact, you're probably going to fail. That was, and sort of reading that into Sam and Frodo's relationship, and then kind of finding inspiration from the way that they care for each other and the way that they sort of hold each other up at different times. That was really, really meaningful to me. So yeah, I think the escapism and the sort of themes of so much of Lord of the Rings, it almost is this like sort of like apocalyptic world where so many things are ending and dying, and it feels, I mean, it's a fool's hope that they'll succeed at all. And so I think that like that kind of the hope and the endurance, because Frodo like doesn't have hope very often, but he does just keep going even though he continually thinks he's about to die. And like that kind of that really resonated with me personally, and I think with a lot of people who got into it this year.
It is a profound meditation on how far you can endure pain and then eventually come out on the other side, but not entirely unscarred, not entirely unchanged.
Yeah.
You will come out. The promise of the Lord of the Rings is that you'll get to the other end of it. You will get to the other end of it, but you will be a changed person.
And that
isn't it weird?
And that is something that you don't see in a lot of fantasy either. And seeing the trauma and the scars that stick around and having that be honored in the narrative is something that I find really, really compelling, and is another reason why I really relate to those characters more than your average fantasy character.
There's even a way for survivors of HIV to see things in other characters, such as being wounded.
Yeah.
It's something that is a wound or the shadow of a wound
that
you carry with you for a long, long time. And it might be healed, but it doesn't really go away.
Yeah.
You know, there's all kinds of bits and things in LGBTQ interpretation of Tolkien that can be found in the most simple and elegant but always humanistic ways.
Yeah.
There's nothing that Tolkien ever bothered to put in there that wasn't as basic as understanding you are a good person capable of wonderful, wonderful things. If you get there, you're going to have to work for it. You're going to have to work as hard as you can. But people will support you, and people will love you, and that initial grain. This is probably why you have a problem with orcs being so categorically irredeemable, and because the morality of any person, even Frodo believes that Gollum has those grains of hope, where he can, quote unquote, change or become more evolved as a person. Even Frodo believes that Gollum has a chance for grace, for mercy. I don't need to be a practicing Catholic to understand Frodo's behavior of compassion.
The theme of mercy is so beautiful in
really
it, and
is.
it's like not having a religious read on it, but respecting that read when people do, but just finding that the idea of mercy and of sparing sort of Gollum, and that kind of working out, and that seems like that is like the book to me has so little of like divine providence in it, and then like maybe that moment is the one where it's like, because you saved Gollum, then the ring could be destroyed, and that is the only way it could have happened. And it's really cool. It's very emotional.
It is. It's very emotional.
Yeah.
And Professor Tolkien didn't have to bother to do the things that C.S. Lewis wanted to do. He didn't have to make it so specific. he just let it be and let the people who read the story absorb it the way. I love that we're having this conversation.
I know, me too.
This is so
Have you
great.
seen the meme that's like Tolkien is like if you ask me if this is an allegory one more time, I will come to your house and shoot you. And then like C.S. Lewis is like, if they do not realize that the lion is Jesus, I will kill myself. Like it's just like very, very accurate.
That's a great meme. That's a great meme. That's very funny.
So
I love that.
did your rereadings influence anything directly in the book, the new book?
Oh gosh, no, I was kind of working on it. I was sort of had written it and drawn it mostly by the time I like really got into it, but I think it's a love story. It's a queer love story. One of the main characters definitely looks a lot like how I draw Sam Gamgee and kind of has that like cute like roundness and softness and like very like earnest and devoted love, which is just something I really love to write. Yeah, and then I think she also talks in like a little bit of like an old-timey dialect, and so there's definitely some like Tolkien-esque phrases in there.
I love very earnest characters. Don't you like writing earnest characters?
Yeah, and it's so interesting because it's just like it's hard to do. It's sort of hard to do right now. The ways that narratives have been, the way that they're existing right now, and like we're expecting narratives to be like a referendum or like a sort of like turning on its head things that have come before. So it's very hard to write just like a purely earnest character. And it was really fun. It was really fun to get to do that in this book, and then I think have like a more sort of cynical character to balance her out.
Can I make another Studio Ghibli reference?
Yeah.
Is this reminds me of when Marnie was there.
You know what? I haven't actually.
Can I say that?
That's one of the only movies I haven't seen by
Really?
him. Yeah.
You're gonna love it.
Okay.
Okay. You're gonna love it.
Okay.
You're gonna love it.
Yeah,
You're gonna love it.
I've heard that it's beautiful.
It is beautiful, and it's part memory, part ghost story, and part something else entirely. But it's really a lovely film, and this is a really lovely book. This is the newly published "The Girl from the Sea," and this is by Molly Knox Ostertag. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I hate to wrap things up, but as all good things must come to an end, as Captain Picard always reminds us, I can't thank you enough for being here.
Oh man, thank you.
This has been really, really awesome.
This has been lovely.
Like,
yeah.
to geek out with you and to have this kind of openness and I'm going to do the Gandalf quote, but this is a very encouraging thought that we can elevate our conversations with each other, and that we can approach this with an open hand and an open heart as we explore more modern and interesting interpretations of Tolkien that are not just viable, but they're like living and breathing as a huge part of the fan culture for all of us. It's genuine. And so
to me, that is the highest compliment. It's been so cool seeing, I mean, I like flatter myself that I like got some people into Lord of the Rings who like came from my animation work and then saw me doing all this fan work and like got really into that story, and it keeps it alive, and it's an act of love to continually revisit these things and keep them alive and not sort of freeze them in amber, but to be like, let this be a living, breathing text that we are engaging with and making memes about and interpreting. I think it's been really, really fun, and I've had a wonderful time kind of meeting people in that community.
super good. It's wonderful, and thank you.
Like you.
Thank you. But oh, you are so wonderful. Oh my gosh, Molly. It's Molly, and now it's time.
me.
It's time for Clifford to say thank you, Justin, and to thank you to the hardworking staff of Scum and Villainy Cantina for helping us continue this wonderful live stream, and thank you for this gift.
Of course.
This is so super cool. Where are folks going to get their copy of The Girl from the Sea?
You can get it probably in any bookstore. Yeah, I would say just try, if you can, order from a local bookstore or go in. Pretty much everywhere has it.
Look at the back cover. It's so Ponyo.
I
love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's like a seaside romance. It's I would say if you are a queer person looking for a romance, or if you have like a queer teen in your life who like wants sort of a sweet slice of life story, that's the vibe.
Yeah, what age group do you write for?
It's young adult, so it's a little older than my other work, mostly by virtue of the fact that there's like some kissing because it's a romance. But it definitely skews younger. So I'm trying to think of, I think there was like an 8-year-old at my signing yesterday, and they were like, I don't like when people kiss in movies. And I was like, that's fine. You can skip those parts. I think you'll like the rest of it. There's a girl who turns into a seal. There's like some environmental terrorism. There's some friend drama. Like there's some other fun stuff besides the kissing. So I think like 8 and up is probably appropriate.
Are you familiar with Peter Milligan and Duncan Figueiredo's work Enigma?
No.
May I introduce you, because it's our Pride Month episode, one of the most influential and impactful early DC Vertigo books. And at that time in the mid-90s, I was like, oh, hey, I've discovered Neil Gaiman and I've discovered The Sandman. And then I was a voracious reader and consuming everything that DC Vertigo could throw at me. And so in honor of Pride Month, I would like to mention that Dark Horse Comics is going to be a definitive, they're going to be publishing a really beautiful collected edition. This is all 12 issues of Enigma, which is a great, great comic book of wild, like, psychedelic scope and LGBTQ themes, written by Peter Milligan and illustrated by Duncan Figueiredo. And that new definitive edition is about to be released. It's a wonderful, wonderful. You know what? In exchange, I think I know what I'm going to get you for your birthday.
Oh.
I'm going to get you this wonderful book.
Oh,
Let me know what you think of it. It's
okay,
really great stuff.
thank you.
Okay. And thank you for being here, Molly. Hey, you're going to follow us. We're at the One Ring Net on all the social media channels, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And the fog machine is merciless tonight. The fog machine is... we can't turn it off. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you can find me online at QuickBeam2000 on Instagram and Twitter. And I've got to say, Hobbit Gay is the first account to look for. And the second one is Molly Ostertag, right? And another one is Ginger Hazing, where you can find Noelle Stevenson.
Yeah.
Yay!
Yes, my
Your wife.
partner.
That's
Yes.
so wonderful. So come back and talk with us again
Well,
soon.
yeah, listen, I
Would
would
you?
absolutely love to. I have a lot more to say, so I'm ready.
Awesome.
I'm ready. Yeah.
Awesome sauce.
Thank you for having me. And I love this community is so wonderful. So it's just like really cool to see people keeping this story that we all love so much alive.
Very much alive. And I'm telling you what, this is I can't end with a better thought than that, so I'm just going to end. So you guys be safe and be careful out there, and we'll see you next Tuesday, of course, at 5 o'clock p.m. here at theonering.net. That's 5 o'clock Pacific time. And until then, I say good night and good luck, or better yet, buenos noches y buena suerte. Bye, everyone. Woo, we did it.